Hi, Marianne here. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be delving more deeply into the awakening process, self-mastery process itself. And in order to do that, I'll be looking into and giving at least a high-level overview. I'll get more detailed in upcoming videos, but of some of the, I'll call them rules of engagement here for this world, this density, our dimension, and so forth. Okay, well, let's dive right in. In an earlier video, I gave a very high-level overview of some of our humanity's origins and a little bit of history of who we are, what we are, and how we got where we are today in this present reality. And I mentioned the human template in that process, the energetic genetics behind the mind-body complex that are interlaced with the mind-body complex. And the human template, the template itself, was not always a part of our whole makeup. The template only came into being after the creators of humanity in this reality, probably some version of you in the past and even in the future, coming back to make changes and adjustments. But by and large, in our long ago past, very highly advanced beings. And the unique gift that they gave humanity was the capacity for creating just from consciousness, pure creational potential, and vital energy, the physical form, physicality, a body, the mind-body complex. That was unique to us. And the point being to progress consciousness and use physicality as a means of doing that. Physical form, physical environment, and so forth. And it was so successful that many races and civilizations of humanity were able to progress more expediently into higher level densities and higher level dimensions as a result of using this world for that purpose and these mind-body complexes for that purpose. And at some point along the way, and remember, this is all my perspectives, my understandings, and either you can connect with them or not, but don't reject them. Remember what I spoke to before. Observe and come back to. I can't tell you how many times I've done that, where I encountered information that at one level I just knew I'm not one to reject information, but I knew I wasn't ready for it. And invariably, if it's something that I needed to know, it came back to me. It would show up again, and I would look at it again and have a totally different response because it was further down the road and I had a deeper level understanding, higher order understandings and knowledge. And then I received it in a completely different way. So keep that in mind. But these races, these creational races, moved on to higher densities and dimensions and far beyond the fifth and sixth densities and dimensions of our world. But before they left, other races were observing, had been observing and seeing the progress that we had made in terms of mastering incredible energies and working with, in cooperation with this reality to advance the progression of all within it and the reality itself. And so these other races wanted to participate, to advance their own civilizations. And so the template was created, affording access energetically to our energetic infrastructure. And the point being, once again, so that other races could partake of the progression success that humanity had achieved. Keep in mind, too, that these more highly advanced versions of ourselves were going off into other densities and realities and off to other things. And so what they intended to do and did, in inviting certain other races, they invited a few races in particular to be the overseers of this human consciousness progression project. But as I mentioned in the earlier video, some of these races decided that they were truly intimidated by this process. They perhaps weren't as advanced as the human civilizations that asked them to oversee the project thought they were. And in humanity's own irresponsibility and really not kind of sticking around to see how things were progressing in this reality, or in the reality at that time, these races that were intimidated by us, things just started going downhill from there, let's just say. Because of their intimidation, they did everything they could, all manner and means of keeping us regressed from progressing, still helping themselves to our genetics so that they could create themselves in physical form. But the very fact that they were keeping us regressed was limiting their own capacity to do that, to create a mind-body complex. and contributing, let me back up a little bit. Not only when regression really kicks in, not only does it regress the consciousness level, the degree of higher level consciousness and energies in the mind-body complex and ultimately the reality around us, it regresses, so to speak, changes the outward appearance of the physical form, the mind-body complex. That regresses as well. And that's tied directly to the type of perspectives being held by those that are attempting to create. For example, the human mind-body complex, as I've mentioned before, was originally fourth density. And remember, dimension, physicality, always, and we see this every day in our world, always unfolds based on the perspectives and actions and behaviors of the beings who occupy that space. So because we were regressing consciously, in consciousness, our physical forms have changed. The human mind-body complex is still an amazing, incredible form, basically unlike any other. But the energies that comprise it have become far more dense, and all energy is vibrational, vibrational forces. And when the vibration slows, then the energies become more dense, more physical, if you will, and give the appearance of being more solid. The original human form was much less dense, much more fluid in its form, thus much more capable of moving within the various densities and dimensions through which we were originally constructed to be able to move through and operate within. So, this brings up one of the principles of this world, of this reality, is that whatever perspectives, whatever you participate in that influences your outlooks, your perspectives, your ideas, the way you operate, directly impacts what unfolds around you, including the body, the mind-body complex. So all of that is impacted by what you participate in. Hence, my prior mention of being incredibly selective about that which you choose to participate in. Whatever belief systems, whatever concepts and ideologies that you adhere to, and the language and the words you use, all of that plays a role. And those higher density beings that came to our world already knew this. They know this. They knew it. Just like we used to know it. But we, in the higher density versions of ourselves that originally created the mind-body complex and this reality, weren't taking responsibility. We weren't taking responsibility for our creation and the project to keep progressing in this reality. That's where the other being stepped in and started manipulating our energetic genetics, as well as the physical, the DNA genetics of the physical form, to suit their purposes. And invariably, other than being able to, in some cases, literally feed off of our energetic genetics, their attempts to use, and not in a good way, to use our genetics for their own service to self, consciously regressive agendas, or consciousness regression agendas, their own physical forms regressed. And I'm going to tell you something now that is my deep knowing and understanding that you may or may not agree with. But these other races and civilizations were versions of ourselves as well. And they didn't take full responsibility for this project either. Not only those who had instigated and moved on to different creation, progression cycles and densities and so forth, but those who came here. And those who have continued to come, both from the past and the future. Some of them regressing so extremely that they can no longer take on any sort of physical form whatsoever. They're just dark, energetic forces. Some people call these, the very darkest, most regressed are usually referred to as demons, dark forces. But others, again, polarity exists based in the inherent duality of this universe. And so what a lot of people have seen or experienced, first of all, are probably holographic projections, because most of these races and civilizations cannot take physical form, or choose not to, in third density, third dimension. They either can't or choose not to. So it's beneath them. So their physical forms are in higher densities, fourth and fifth density. And some of these have manifested, like I said, they show up as reptilians, the Greys, Pleiadians, yes, Pleiadians too, because the Pleiadians that are showing themselves now are not the higher order, more highly evolved, ancient Pleiadians that have basically been, they were wiped out because of their incredible capacity to create, and they were fully heart-centered, centered. And they had beautiful things to contribute to the human project. But they were wiped out long ago. So the Pleiadians that exist today are not the same as the original. And they too, although they are not wanting to control the progression of humanity in the same way that the reptilians, which are really Sirians, Orions, they like an ordered progression. And this world is not about that. It's about free-flowing, dynamic, chaotic creation. So I propose to you out there who are listening to and buying wholly what some of these other races have been feeding us, particularly those, or I would say, first and foremost, looking at those that are presenting themselves as benevolent, consciousness progressive entities, are not. They have a hidden agenda. I'm not saying they're all bad, that they're all evil, but they have an agenda, as well as the Sirians, reptilians, to keep us regressed. And truly, you need to understand this as well. One of the rules of engagement within our reality is to not interfere with another's journey. Now, I know that sounds in opposition to what we're here for in terms of progressing, helping others progress, but let me make some distinctions. To interfere means to not respect, truly love and accept the value and sovereignty and journey and all that that individual is for what it is. Interfering means to want to, at some level, control. And in doing that, if someone agrees to it and goes along with it, you're giving up your sovereignty, your individuality, of this version of yourself. you're signing it over to someone you think knows better than you. And no one knows better than you where you need to be, what you need to be doing and where you need to be heading in this reality. And that's a good portion of what we're tasked with if you're on this journey, the journey of reclaiming full human responsibility and reclaiming our original human mind-body complex, creational energies, and other capacities, accessing pure potential in conjunction and using pure vital energy to achieve that means. But you're responsible for what you create. Now, the distinction I wanted to make between interfering and helping others progress on their journey is, as opposed to trying to manipulate someone or to lead them through deceptive ideas or concepts or actions to head them in the directions that you want them to head in, to help someone progress on their journey means to say, look, this is what I or we are doing, and if it happens to align with where you're headed, what you see, if you're attuned to your core self and its desires for this version of itself in this reality, then join us. You can participate as well. As opposed to, you need to do this no matter what, and tricking us along the way, deceiving us into doing things in the way that they know will affect how and what we become in future timelines. So that's the difference. Now, the rules of engagement, the operating principles of this reality, as well as the fact that whatever we participate in, whatever we agree to, whether consciously or subconsciously, whatever we're participating in is the way in which our progression or regression unfold. That's the way it works. That's not going to change in this world. And if you really look at things and take a step back at your own life or situations and circumstances, you'll see that that's exactly the way it does work. Because when you, as you've grown older, for example, once you got out of university and you started seeing things differently, your reality began unfolding differently. That's just the way it works. Another principle, another rule, higher order rule of engagement in this reality is that because of that, if you, excuse me, unreality unfolds through your beliefs and your activities and the things that you participated in. And if those activities and behaviors and actions are not aligned with the higher order principles of this reality and how it was designed to work to help all progress in consciousness expansion, then if you're not operating in accordance with that and trying to work things to your own means of, or your own idea of how things should be, then that's called a transgression. You're transgressing. And you're accountable for that. And this is exactly why these races and civilizations that have manipulated us, our genetics, and used social conditioning and social engineering programs to confine us, if not further regress us. They know these principles. They understand them deeply. And this is why so much of what they do is trying to convince us to do their work for them. And frankly, you kind of have to admire them. They've done a heck of a job at convincing us to keep ourselves regressed because of the things we participate in, the beliefs that we hold, the actions that we take or don't take, the fact that we no longer have felt that we're responsible at the highest level for nurturing and seeing to the progression, supporting this world in its progression as well, working in cooperation with it and its energies and our energies, working in tandem to progress both ourselves and this reality. We're doing it to ourselves. We're holding ourselves down and contributing to our further regression. And that's the understanding that these other races already have had for millennia. They know this. And this is why they operate in the ways that they do. So, and the social conditioning and social engineering programs known as government, religion, the money system, those are the three biggest of their social engineering, mind conditioning programs into which they have seduced us. But one of the other aspects of their efforts to keep us regressed has been the genetic manipulation, the tampering, the stealing, the using our energies, both in the 3D realm through work, really sucking us dry that way, as well as feeding off of the energetic aspects of ourselves, the higher order energies of ourselves, the higher level energies that excuse me, are accessible via the template, our template, which was not intended for that purpose. But because we didn't take responsibility for ourselves, our creations, here we are today. So now I'm going to bring this into the work that we are to do. And in a previous video, I talked about distortions. All of the false beliefs, ideologies, dogmas, concepts that, pardon me, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water here. Okay. These ideas have distorted not only the physical body and regressed it to the state it's currently in, but have contributed, or the sole contributors to whatever challenges that we're facing, mental, emotional, physical challenges. That's how these concepts manifest within us and through us as mental, physical, emotional disorders. And it's a self-perpetuating cycle. the more we're attached to, and that includes ego identifications and ego attachments. Those are also distorted perspectives of what we really are and what's really behind us, and meaning core self, whole self. We've allowed these egoic identifications and attachments to become, or to be in the driver's seat, as opposed to whole self, core self, as it once originally was. So the work here, some of the core work, there are many facets to the self-mastery awakening process. But at the baseline level, it's about clearing, getting rid of, letting go of all of these distortions that we carry with us, not only in the mind-body complex, but at the energetic template level. And clearing the template to the point where it is completely free of energetic manipulation, energetic genetic manipulation, back to its original genetic infrastructure, to the point where, and then at that point, we decide whether or not we wish to continue with this template, create a new one, or dissolve the template so that our energetic genetics are no longer accessible by higher density beings. That we're the only ones. There's no middleman between mind-body complex and core self. So, I know this flies directly in the face of a lot of things that are being put out there right now. One of those being the whole 12-strand activation of all these aspects of our template. I want you to stop and think about this for a minute. And of course, if this is the route that you know is the route for you to take, that you trust the entities and beings that have been promoting that to be looking out for everyone's best interests, then keep following that. It's up to you. If you feel that that is totally aligned with core self and what core self projected you for in the mind-body complex within this reality at this time, then by all means continue. But from where I'm sitting, and you need to know this about me, before, all throughout this journey, but even before, I'm a very, and I was too much, was very left brain oriented. And I know that relates back to some of my own genetics. But I still am. And I'm grateful that I had that, even though it was an imbalanced aspect of myself. It was out of balance. I was far too mentally oriented. But I'm deeply grateful that I discovered that. I still keep a close check on it. But I'm a very practical, pragmatic person. And if you understand some of the history behind humanity that I'm speaking of today, then, and the manipulation that's gone on and the tampering that's gone on to serve the purposes of these other races who are looking out only for themselves and not us, that they tamper with genetics, they manipulate them, and then they siphon them off and then say bye-bye until next time. Or they sell it off to other races and civilizations. So with that in mind, it just doesn't make sense to me to go about restoring and reactivating all of the genetics that we hold in the template or in the mind-body complex. Because we don't know of all of the changes that have been made. And think about this. How dangerous that might be to activate some of the, because oftentimes they interjected their own genetics. Some of these very consciousness regressive races, various versions of ourselves, interjected their consciousness regressive genetics. And I don't know about you, but I choose not to just randomly say, I'm going to activate all of this now, because a lot of that's already happening. That accounts for part of the extremely volatile behaviors and events that are happening all around the world now. People are awakening to various aspects, either through built-in timing or as a result of various events and goings on around them that trigger them, awakening to some of these recessed, let's just say, non-consciousness progression supportive genetic aspects of themselves. For example, lack of compassion. Because if these races that are messing with us had a balanced sense of compassion, would they be doing what they're doing? If they truly understood real love, would they be doing what they're doing? Excuse me. So I don't know about you, but I don't want to, at least not until I understand more about some of the genetics that are regressive, are considered and considered infected by some really higher density races, which is why we've kind of been cut off from them, because they don't want to infect our lineage. It's going to have to be dealt with at some point, and sometimes there aren't very pleasant options for getting rid of an infection. So we need to keep that in mind. And some humans since World War II, or shortly thereafter, the DNA has been so tampered with so as to create what are called hybrids. Physical hybrids that human military saw at the time in their ignorance, and their only excuse is that they have been greatly deceived themselves dealing with some of these races, getting these technologies into our society. And of course, the highest level of these technologies, remember, they're primarily mechanically and quantum based. They're not higher order consciousness and energy sourced technologies. But getting these into our society to help keep us unaware of what we really are and what we were here to do. Those of us on the conscious awakening journey. And these humans did this to humans, even if it was through deception, misunderstanding. It was still about seeing themselves as, in some way, superior to the man and woman on the street, and that they knew what was best for us, as opposed to us knowing what was best for ourselves. And honestly, most of them really believed that they were doing what they thought was best to protect us, because they were led to believe that if they didn't, or that no matter what, that other races would be in the future coming and perhaps warring with us. And they wanted to give us a chance to protect ourselves. Hence the hybridization of so many, particularly military families and various indigenous peoples around the world, tampering with our DNA to prepare the body to be able to take on these higher density beings that wanted to come into this reality to take it in an aggressive manner. So, whenever you're sitting around getting worked up or upset or angry over the actions that have been taken, keep in mind that if you're looking to blame someone, we only have ourselves to blame. Because even if we were tricked and deceived into doing various things, it was because on some level we were disconnected from, we thought we were, we did not look to what we really are and what we are capable of. We looked to these higher density beings and trusted them just because they could do tricks and do things with various energies. So it's like, oh, well, they must know better than us. And if they're telling us this, then that means they really must be trying to look out for us. But even at that, they gave away their power and responsibility, and they assumed that the general public was even less aware, that we just couldn't handle knowing about these other races that were coming to them. And that diminished us. And we further became trusting of government. And it's like, well, they'll deal with it. We don't have to deal with it. And it's all part of the self-perpetuating cycle of consciousness regression. And that's what this work is all about. Taking ownership of how we have not just contributed to, but literally different versions of ourselves have created what we are now experiencing. Owning that, knowing that we have been and will be, unless we are constantly taking ownership of that from one moment to the next, we'll continue to have not just consciously progressive, but consciously regressive versions of ourselves. We have to own that in every moment. And this journey doesn't stop after we progress out of fourth density into fifth. Now, I want to talk some more about transgressions and the current transgression level and rate of humanity. I'm sure many of you have been on this journey for a while, and in your research you've heard about once these very cosmic energetic cycles, these major cycles that we're in that are now coming to an end. If you haven't been left shaking in your boots, thinking it was the end of the world, it's not. Why would these beings give all that up? They're not going to. They're not going to. But spreading that around was basically the work of the really dark forces that know they can no longer create a physical form, or thus can't create in physical reality, they can do nothing but feed on our energies. And so they brought about this whole end of world thing, and they've been doing this for millennia. I mean, human beings have been talking about the end of the world since the beginning of the world, or at least since some of these other races have stepped in because they thought they knew what was best for us, but really focus on what they think was best for themselves, because many of these races are so competitive and caught up in the same ideologies that they promulgate here, that technological advance is progression. And if you'll take a minute, I'm sure many of you listening to this, most of you understand this, but I've been questioning for such a long time, even before I understood anything near what I understand now. But I remember asking my parents and even my teachers, when they would speak of all of these great new technologies coming along and all, it's like, well, how does that make life better? How does that make people better? And they couldn't answer when I asked it like that. I mean, everything, the technologies, look at what's being offered today. It's all about convenience, how fast we can get something done, how much more involved with technology, mechanical and quantum, that we can become interlaced and interconnected. I'm sure you've also heard of the frequency fence around this planet. Well, electromagnetic technologies, kind of a chicken and egg thing, have been introduced into this world, this reality, to help keep it regress. But those of us who use them, why do you think they were so interested in getting us addicted to electricity and all of these new technologies? Because so that we are the ones helping keep that frequency fence in place. You and me. Using this computer, talking to you today helps keep the frequency fence up. So what can we do about that? Not a whole lot at this point, until we come more into core self and whole self states of being. But there are things you can do. I'm sure at some point soon I will have to change that, but I don't have a smartphone. I don't want one. I don't need one. As long as I can function. And even at that, even though it's not a smartphone, I know that it's probably got various chips in it. But it is not just, I'm not just turning over every aspect of my life by using a smartphone. And I'm not condemning or judging anyone who does. Please understand that. You make the choices that you make. They're yours to make. But whatever we participate in is how we evolve. And I choose, to the best of my ability in my actions and the way I behave, to not evolve into transhumanism. I choose not to take that timeline. The timeline where we are hooked up to machines and quantum technologies and risk, if not just risk it, but probably will lose our capacity to even connect at any level with core self. I choose not to take that path. In fact, there are many who understand that the grays are the future versions of ourselves. And they keep showing up now because they know they screwed up. The grays are primarily, some of them have some organic, they still have some organic characteristics, but by and large, they're androids, they're machines, they're not, that's why we don't recognize them as ourselves, because they have evolved in such a way, and that's one potential timeline, that we can't even recognize ourselves. And it's not the route that I want to take. So that's something you need to know about me and the work that I do. But they keep showing up, and countless people have seen them and have interacted with them. And this is the result of one potential timeline from where we are right now, poised, a connecting consciousness with mechanical and quantum technologies. I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, Elon Musk and these others. This other gentleman's name escapes me, but have been going at this for years. Some people refer to this as technocracy. And it's something you need to really investigate for yourselves. Because where else can it lead if we give over to technology as savior, teacher, parent, instead of ourselves? There is no other way in which it can, no other direction in which it can head. So keep that in mind. And this is why it is so vital in this journey to start clearing out all these distortions, your ideas about what technology really is, what man-made technology really is. Where are all these technologies really coming from? Do you really think that the scientist on the street there's no guidance involved, or that there's not some genetic heritage through which he's working, where he doesn't even understand that he's been given these ideas by beings that have other ideas in mind? I mean, just look at the science community. And I don't call it science anymore, not mainstream. It's scientism, because true science can stand back and say, I'm wrong, or this isn't right. It's not okay just because I can do it. We keep progressing technologically, by and large, just because we can, without any real looking at the long and even short-term damage that it can cause. So, taking responsibility for everything that you participate in, clearing out these distortions, keep zooming out higher and higher and higher, and looking at what we need to let go of, to release. Because it can also be getting back to this whole, we need to reactivate all of our DNA business. Without understanding what's involved, it can be incredibly dangerous. Because as above, so below. As below, so above. Just like in the physical realm, various groups and individuals have been given jurisdiction over various geographical locations, governments of that area, and those behind the government that do their thing. The same is true in the non-physical realms. Various races and civilizations have been given jurisdiction over various areas of the world. And if you begin waking up, let's just say in a dark jurisdiction, without understanding these things, and start activating various genetic traits and so forth without any understanding. Even if you're working from the place of intending to progress consciousness, but without understanding all these things, it's going to backfire big time. Because until this realm, this reality does change, we have to contend with, we have to understand and contend with some of these higher beings and their factions. And that means that we have to, as I spoke of in the previous video, we have to truly understand and respect where they're coming from in order to be able to make any headway with them. Because if we just react through a prior to recessed warrior gene as a hybrid, without understanding any of this stuff I'm talking about, and say, I've had enough. I'm going to fight these people. I want to take them down and take them out. All you're doing is strengthening the hold of these consciousness regressive beings over our reality and the strings that they pull and the way they've been able to manipulate us in this reality. You're feeding into that. You're perpetuating that cycle. So, again, this goes back to constantly stretching, expanding what you think is going on in this world to higher and higher order levels of understanding so that you can participate within it, continue on your consciousness progressive journey, learn how to skillfully navigate this polarity minefield, and advance your progress on this journey. Clearing, clearing, clearing. Cleaning out distortions, cleaning them out, not just at the mind-body level, but from our energetic centers. Working to attain peak mental, emotional, physical, energetic, and creational capacities. Restoring the mind-body complex to its original state. Clearing the energetic genetics from the template so that we can clean it, get it back to square one, and decide if we want to continue using it, creating something else, or just dissolving it and moving on elsewhere in our consciousness progression journey. Now, there are two approaches to doing this work, and I incorporate both depending upon the individual I'm working with and where they are in the journey and their level of understanding. I incorporate both for myself, primarily one over the other now, but the two approaches are to doing this work: to be constantly cleansing, clearing, letting go, dissolving all of these distortions that interfere with our full embodiment of core self in this reality. And early on, and I say early on, but you could be anywhere on this journey. You may have been on it for 30 years, but if you haven't been doing the clearing work, particularly emotional, mental clearing, even above and beyond energy center clearing, then it doesn't matter how long you've been on the journey. That work has to be done. And in the beginning, it is about clearing and releasing and clearing, releasing, 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 but in a responsible fashion. all of these traumas and pent-up, suppressed emotions that we have within us that are stored in the body that we need to clear out, clean up. But then after a point, and again, this speaks to the pragmatic, efficient, expedient thinking person that I am, that after we get to a certain point, what I discovered is that the more I am filled and consciously filled with core self energies, even if I don't even understand fully what that means, like what that looks like, but just throughout the course of the day, checking in, being fully present, and constantly checking in with that, my level of fulfillment of core self within this mind-body complex, I have to do less and less clearing. Filling up with, when the space is kept clean, then it's a matter of just preventing. Yeah, you still have to do some cleaning, but if you do little bits of maintenance work, energetic, physical, mental, emotional, then after a point, the clearing work can recede a little bit. But you still need to know how to do it, and the way to do it responsibly, without doing harm to others. It's another operating principle of all of consciousness: do no harm. And to do no harm, that means that, yes, we understand that we're sovereign beings, free to create, but we need to do it in ways that do no harm to others and that don't interfere with their journey. It's not all about, like some of these other races that have been messing with us, it's not all about how far we can get technologically. We can't leave the heart behind. And that's what these races have done. Compassion. It's been a competition of how much can we do just because we can do it. They're very, some of these races are very superior. They believe that they are so much better than us, but at the same time they envy us. But what they project and the way they function is through superiority. We know better than you. They would not ever. There are races that have colonized here and have been here for eons, but some of the races that are more in control right now, it would be beneath them to be in this physicality. Yes, in a sense, they're physical in the fifth density, fourth and fifth densities to a point, but to be in 3D physicality is beneath them. And like I said, the irony is at the same time they envy the human's capacity to have done so. And that's why they pushed us down, because fourth density, our original level of density, has been regressed to third density, third dimension. Now, going back to transgressions. We need to be glad for the moment that we're still being suppressed to be functioning within 3 density, 3D. Because at the end of these progression cycles, as I touched on earlier, unless we get to a certain point prior to that, this reality is going to be what's been referred to as reset. And here's what reset really means. For those of you who are going, yeah, I want to reset. I want to start over. I want to make a clean break and just whatever comes, comes. Well, that's all good and well. And you can go that. way if that's where you want to go. However, I think it's important that you understand that reset means that we go back up to fourth density. Boom. Full-blown fourth density. And fourth density means that, well, think instant karma. Whatever we're thinking and feeling in the moment, it's what manifests. Boom, boom, boom. And think about the ramifications of that based on the current human state of consciousness and all the kind of thoughts that people have, and the emotions and negative feelings that they have. And for those races that really want this reality for themselves, and there are those who do, they want it for various reasons, both higher density and lower density races. They want this world. And they know that if the reset happens, then it would be no time at all before humanity is gone. Gone forever. Because the transgression level of humanity at this point in time is so high as a result of the things that we just consider to be human, normal human stuff, the way our views on sex and not having any compassion for others, not really caring about taking care of this reality, not just from a physical standpoint, but from an energetic, co-creative standpoint. Don't look into higher order things. We just stay on the same path without questioning or doing anything to expand ourselves. The way we raise children, the education system that we allow to consume them, we're responsible for all that. And this and so many other aspects of normal human behavior equate to such a high transgression rate that, as I said, we'll just do ourselves and we'll be gone. Poof! We'll regress so quickly that the beings that really would like to get rid of us, they won't have to do a finger. We'll do it ourselves. And then there are others who are looking at the reset opportunity, the potential reset, as an opportunity to convince us that you won't have to worry about any of these things. We can take care of it. We'll find ways. We have ways that we can manage human emotions and human thoughts. We'll take care of it. Trust us. Which is nothing more than another form of control to keep us regress, while they still continue to feed off, harvest, and misuse the human blueprint and the human physical energy. Sometimes in some circles this is referred to, Robert, what's his face, Monroe, referred to it as loosh, the food. And in certain mythologies, the underlying meaning behind the word escapes me, the food of the gods. But I think that as those of us on this journey consciously, yes, this is difficult information. I don't think any of us on this journey who are coming into these knowings and this knowledge are happy about it. But to reject them out of hand and to not look into it at all, to check in with our inner knowing about this stuff, is irresponsible. If you're intending to take, if you're choosing the conscious journey of awakening and self-mastery, consciousness progression route, then it is your responsibility to look into these things and not reject them out of hand just because they're difficult to see, because it's not your inherent nature to do harm to others. And that's one thing that really has made it so hard for many of us to be able to take these things in and work with them, because they're just so abhorrent to our true nature, our true understanding to do no harm. So when you can work through that and get to the other side, this information is incredibly empowering and could make all the difference, will make all the difference on your journey, your consciousness progression journey. And I've said it before and I'll say it one more time. Everyone's journey is unique. And I want you to only take away from these videos what you need to keep progressing on your unique journey. And for those of you that are at a point where you can begin to and want to begin understanding further, embody this knowledge and use it to progress, I'm here for you. And because this is like this is the basics of my work, and I told you the two different approaches I take to it at a fundamental level. There's all sorts of tools and techniques and exercises and actions that can be taken along the way that support you in this journey, as well as the knowledge. And that will be continuing to unfold the more I continue to expand my awareness and understanding of things. And on that note, I think I'm going to call it a wrap for the day. If you are finding this information helpful, I hope you'll subscribe and visit my website and check out. There's more stuff there. I'm adding stuff all the time. But I wish you well until we meet again.